Thank you for telling me.
Hello, everyone. This is Father Michael Tischel.
And this is Strati Papa Georgiou.
And we are
An
Imperfect podcast.
I was trying to say it perfectly.
Perfect. Cue music. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
Or as my wife's uncles would say, who are all dairy farmers in rural Virginia, it's good to be seen.
Good to be seen.
That's their response. Yeah, it's like, good to see you. It's good to be seen.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
I had a thought.
Yes.
And it's gone.
It's gone. What do you think that is? What happens when you have a thought and then it just disappears like that?
Well, they say it's not because it wasn't important. But I don't think that's true. I forget plenty of important things.
Let's not give ourselves that much credit. It's like,
right.
Yeah. It's yeah. I find that the moment that I stop thinking about it and trying, then it just kind of reemerges.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So today, what are we doing exactly?
Yeah. So we are going to dive in a little bit to the book about Saint Porphyrios, Elder Porphyrios, recently canonized, that's known in the English language as Wounded by Love, and in the Greek language as Vios ke Logi. So it's basically just his life and teachings, and both the life and teaching sections are essentially spontaneous or kind of like impromptu reflections that he gave to some people that were then recorded and transcribed and then turned into a book. So it's not like any sort of like academic, biography or anything like that, but it really gives you a feel, even in the biographical section or autobiographical section, gives you a feel for who he was. So our thought was just to kind of like dive into that, to actually read a short section of the beginning of the biography, and then to talk about it. And I will just say, personally, and we've talked about this a lot before, but Saint Porphyrios is really like a central beloved saint for me. I feel like there was a point in college, especially when I read Wounded by Love for the first time, and just kind of fell in love with Saint Porphyrios' approach to the Christian life. Very hopeful, very encouraging, kind of focused on light and focusing on the light of Christ, on love and simplicity, exactly. And I really feel as though he offers a path. It's not unique. It is the Orthodox path, but he offers it in such a way to a modern audience that really gives us a sense of hope, in a very despondent, and despairing world, for many different reasons. And so for that reason, and for other reasons, we figured maybe we could just dive in because, we need some light in our lives. We need some hope and simplicity. And hopefully we can use this as a way to kind of set the tone for our conversation for this wonderful Imperfect podcast.
I think it's a great idea. Saint Porphyrios, and he's close to my heart too, because my parents met him.
Yes.
And we have that video for anybody who wants to see Father Panagiotis talk about his encounter with him, which, I don't know, changed the course of, how they thought, or perhaps, or at the very least revealed some things to them that only they could have known, and then probably changed my mom's course of in the way of thinking and love for life. So he was amazing. He was a little less known than Father Paisios, but he was He was extraordinary. His simplicity was just so genuine. You know, he when he spoke to people, he could cut right through any pretension, besides the fact that the revelations he would receive from God, he just had this way of moving right through any obstacle that would hinder a normal person like you and me.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
And he wasn't afraid to tell people exactly how it was. For instance,
Sure.
this woman came with her daughter and was upset because her other daughter ran away from home or something.
Yeah.
And God revealed to him some things, and he just told her exactly how it was. He told her it's your fault. And
right. Yeah.
And you know, there was no anger, malice, anything like that, frustration with him. He just told this woman, look, you did this, it's your fault.
Right.
Which it's hard for us to do that without, you know, having some sort of emotional
right.
You know, reaction.
Right. And then also eliciting the same reaction in the person that we're talking to, and thereby doing more harm than good.
But
somehow he was able to do it in a way that actually healed her. And yeah, that's incredible.
There's a great story, but I won't. Well, I just brought it up.
Yeah,
there's a great little story.
Yeah.
Let me just paint the picture right here. We're
Exactly.
talking about Father Porphyrios is this tiny 90-something-year-old cancer patient.
Right.
Who has cancer of, I think it's in his frontal head.
Okay.
Frontal cortex. It was in the front anyway.
Okay. Yep.
And it affected his sight. It pushed against his optic nerve, so he couldn't really see. Well, he could, as people would discover, but not quite the way they would think he could see.
Yeah.
So one story, and there's an unmentionable amount. Like you cannot, you'll never find the end of the rabbit hole of the stories. But there's one. So he was very well known to be very handy with the telephone. He knew how to use those. Imagine if he had a cell phone. He would call people. Anyway, so let me get to the. So one day, this couple came to him and told him that their son is, citation needed. I don't remember exactly how it goes.
Yeah.
But this is the gist.
Yeah.
This couple came to him and told him that their son, she is with this girl, and they don't like her. Now, I know somebody might thinking, well, okay, classic, parents don't like her. No, but they had a good reason. And they were trying to urge him to go and talk to him. And I think he spoke to him one time, but a few minutes, and that was it.
Yep.
So one day they came to him and they told him, Father, he's going on a trip with her. They're going on some trip somewhere. So they check into the hotel, and all of a sudden, they're in the room, and the phone rings, and the front desk wants them. So he goes downstairs to the front desk, and it's Father Porphyrios.
Like in the flesh or on the phone?
On the phone.
Okay.
Of course, on the phone.
Because he was old.
He was calling everybody.
Right.
Yeah, on the phone, and he's like, 1 minute, just give me a moment. And all of a sudden, he connects the room that they were in, the phone there. He connects it to the speaker that he's listening to in the lobby, and he hears her talking to another man.
Wow.
And he wasn't of the world, even though he lived in the world.
Right.
And he perfectly sort of embodied that concept: in the world, not of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating.
He was able to deal with the things of the world and remaining not of the world.
Sure.
He used the telephone, which is of the world, in ways that are
Sure.
not of the world.
Right. It's a very interesting kind of integration of those two aspects.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes him that much more, I think, sort of attractive for a modern audience, because it kind of gives us the sense that he was otherworldly, but not to the extent that he wasn't able to sympathize with our current.
He talks a lot about that. He talks about the troubles, that one of the troubles, but the things he hears in confession, and they're very modern things, more modern and things like that. So
yep.
He was definitely
in touch with that,
completely in touch with it.
Yep. Good. Well, I think that whets our appetite for what we're about to read. And again, this is the kind of beginning of his autobiographical notes at the very beginning of Wounded by Love, where he basically just starts from the beginning of his life and kind of reflects a little bit about some of the experiences in a very scattered and not systematic way, but in a way that kind of gives you, I think, a feel for his personality and for his simplicity. So shall we dive in?
Yep.
All right. And I do have the Greek text alongside in case we ever want to reference that, just to kind of see what cross-reference a word or something like that. So we can always do that. But I will obviously read from the English text. The path to the holy mountain. My dream was to imitate St. John the Hut Dweller. I'm from the village of Agios Ioannis. There's a village in Evia called Agios Ioannis. That's where I'm from. My parents were poor, and so my father left the village and went to America. He worked there as a laborer on the Panama Canal. In the village, we children did chores from the earliest age. We would water the garden and the trees. We would bring in the animals. We would do whatever job the grown-ups told us to do. When I was little, I used to mind the flocks up on the mountain. I was slow-witted and shy. I went to school for 1 year, and we learnt virtually nothing because the teacher was ill. While I was looking after the sheep, I read the life of St. John the Hut Dweller, syllable by syllable. That's where my zeal to go and become a monk came from. Even though I knew nothing, I hadn't even seen a monk or a monastery. Nothing. When I was 7, my mother sent me to Halkida to work in a shop. It sold everything. Shops at that time used to have ironmongery, keys, screws, locks, and ropes, and so on. But they'd also have sugar and rice and coffee and pepper and everything you'd find in a grocer's. It was a big shop. There were two other boys there. I went and joined them. I did whatever they told me to. Everyone bossed me about, and I was never off, my feet running to and fro. Before I arrived, the 2 other boys had worked out a system whereby they would go up to the balcony day and day, about to water the basil plants belonging to the boss's wife. They had a rotation. When I arrived, they gave me to do everything. They got me to do everything, to sweep the floor and water the flowers. It didn't cross my mind that it was unfair. I did everything. Wherever they told me to go, I went. One day, just as I was finishing sweeping the shop, I noticed that some coffee beans had spilled on the floor next to where I had gathered my pile of rubbish. There would have been about 15 beans in all. I bent down and picked them up and walked over to the sack with the coffee beans. My boss was in his office. It had windows all around, and he saw me bending down and then walking over to the sack. He called out, Angelos, meaning me. That's what they used to call me when I was young. Come over here. I went over. What have you got in your hand? What's that? They're coffee beans. I found them over there and I picked them up, I said. He started to shout, Tassos, Aristos, Yannis, Yorgos. One was in the storeroom and the others in various parts of the shop. The boss kept shouting. They all gathered in the office. The boss opened my hand. Do you see that? What's that? He asked. Coffee beans, they answered. Where did you find them, Angelos? They were littered on the floor, and I picked them up and was about to throw them into the coffee sack, I replied. Well, my boss started to give us a lecture. What went on in that shop was nobody's business. Such wastage. Scoops would be tossed right, left, and center. Listen now, he said. As from today, you're going to organize a rotation for the jobs in here. 1 week it will be Aristos, 1 week Tassos, 1 week Angelos, for the flowers and for everything. My boss's family was very fond of me. They would invite me up to their house and would get me to sing to them whatever hymns I knew. They looked on me with real affection. My action in picking up the beans had made an impression on them because they didn't know me. After 2 years, I went to Piraeus to work in a grocer's shop owned by a relative. The grocer's shop was also a taverna. There was a little attic there where I slept at night. The shop was on a hill in Samados Street. People would come by every day to do their shopping, and many of the customers would sit down to have a drink or a snack, since it doubled as a taverna. All right, so that's sort of the first subsection. And I wonder, even just from that, if there's something that we want to settle on.
Yeah, I mean, just off the bat, every time I hear this, or every time I read this, I'm just in awe of how simple. There's a village called Ioannis. That's where I was born.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. You know?
I know. Right. Yeah.
This is my father's name. This is my mother's name. Okay. He went to Panama, I like it. I mean,
yeah. That's, it's, there's that's the way to put this. He himself admits that he didn't receive much of an education from an academic standpoint.
Yeah.
But there are different ways of approaching the world and different ways of approaching our knowledge of the world. One of them is in that kind of abstracted academic sense, where you learn about certain things and you kind of learn different concepts and constructs and different things that kind of complexify your knowledge of the world. But then there is the kind of knowledge that's this kind of more immediate, intuitive kind of knowledge of just things and stuff. And, they don't, well, I'm just saying, I mean, I wouldn't say that one is bad or anything by any means, but there is something about him not having gone down that road originally of academic knowledge, which kept him in that very authentic kind of immediate encounter with the world around him. And that kind of grounded him, I think, in a certain sense, and then allowed him to develop in a different direction than he would have if he had gone down the road of secular knowledge or academic learning or something.
There was no theory. It was
all very very practical, I guess you could say. But what was there was his desire, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. But his desire to that it gets at this whole idea that I think is so important, which is that our vision of the human person is that what is at the heart of who we are as humans is our heart, not our mind, right? And that ultimately someone could have a non-developed mind but a very sophisticated heart.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I mean, he did develop his mind too. I mean, we hear about how later on he got interested in all these different
but I also heard that they, who was I listening to who said that when he talked to him, he could poke a little, well, not fun, but like kind of tease him a little bit. But when he spoke to another, like more educated elder, whatever, it was a little bit kind of a different relationship.
Interesting.
So with him, he could kind of, poke him a little bit,
Interesting.
Kind of, because of his simplicity, it was like, I don't know. I can't remember. I heard it years ago.
Yeah.
But it was more easy to be kind of, I don't know, to not treat him the same way you would treat like an academic, not even academic, but a more well-educated person. You could kind of play with that side of him.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that the whole idea of his simplicity, I mean, if we even dive into that a little bit, there's something about simplicity that means that the different aspects of who you are sort of all lined up and integrated. And so there's not this sense that, you think this way and act another way, or you have this abstracted sense of yourself where you're always kind of observing yourself and how you look before other people. And it's kind of just like, yeah, this is how I am, right? And of course, I mean, Saint Porphyrios was a human. I'm sure he had his faults and other areas, whatever that he had to overcome by the grace of God. What's that?
He points them out even. And,
he even points them out, right?
His book,
yeah. But that authenticity, that guilelessness, that simplicity, is something that's really, really powerful. It's really powerful.
All right, let's hear some more.
Let's do it. I developed a deep desire to become a hermit. One day, 2 elderly men came into the shop. They sat down and asked for 2 sardines and half an oka of wine. And then there's a little footnote that says oka is a Turkish measure of weight and capacity. 1 oka equals about 2/3 of a quart. I fetched their order at once. Then I heard one of them say to the other, "You should see the wine I drank on the holy mountain. I haven't found wine like that anywhere." "So you've been to the holy mountain, have you?" asked the other. "Yes," he replied. "I left my home in Mytilene once. Kaloni was my village, and I went off to the holy mountain. We used to drink monoxylitico wine there." What a wine that was. And here again, the footnote says, wine produced in the Monoxylitis monastery, a dependency of the monastery of the Inisiu on Mount Athos. "Did you go to become a monk?" queried the other man. "Yes, I wanted to become a monk, but I wasn't able to. I wasn't up to it. How I regret now that I didn't stay there." I listened to all this with great attention because sometime earlier, a group of monks had passed by handing out booklets. One was about the life of St. John the Hut Dweller, which, as I told you, I had stammered through syllable by syllable while I was looking after the sheep in the village. I had reread it up in the attic by the light of a lantern, with considerable difficulty because I hadn't learned to read properly. The life of the saint filled me with such enthusiasm that I wanted to imitate it. But about the holy mountain, I knew nothing. I went to become a monk, but I left, continued the old man. How marvelous it was there. I saw monks, hermits, holy men striving to love God and battling away in the wilderness with fasts, deprivations, and prayers, but I left it all behind and returned to the world and snarled myself in 1,000 cares and troubles. I remember it all constantly, and I regret I didn't stay there. Instead of landing myself back here in the world with all the troubles and trials of family and children, all these cares of life have brought me to my knees. Yes, I remember it all. Soon the 2 men got up and left, but my mind remained captivated by what I heard. From that moment, I was filled with zeal to go to the place he'd been speaking about. My mind became fixated on the idea that I could realize my dream of imitating St. John the Hut Dweller. It became my all-consuming desire. 2 days later, the elderly man came in again. He lived close by. I went up to him, and out of earshot of the others, I asked him, "Tell me, Kiradonis, what are things like up there on the holy mountain? Is it a good place? You heard about it the last time. I can't tell you anything at the moment." And he didn't tell me anything. He left. But I, in the meantime, could think of nothing else. I developed a deep desire to become a hermit. But how? I didn't know how to go to the holy mountain. I had no money, nor did I know what to say to my boss. Kiradonis came back once more to the shop. Once again, I secretly queried him about the holy mountain. This time he told me everything. But how was I going to leave? And what was I going to say? There it is.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. What do you find amazing about it?
He just knew.
Right.
Some people, they just know. They hear about it and they're like, "Look, I'm going there.
It's amazing, huh?
I have to go." And what? He's like, well, how old is he? 9?
Yeah.
Younger?
He was, something like that. Yep.
That's just.
It reminds me, I have a friend from my studies in Thessaloniki. His name's Michel, and he's actually from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay.
And he is one of the, you could say, people in the Congo that were influenced by the missionary efforts of Father Cosmas, who was a monk from Grigoriou, who became a missionary to, at that time, Zaire, now the country of Congo. And many people, after he became a missionary, started to go to Thessaloniki to study theology and other things. And my friend Michel actually came to study psychology. He was originally a nurse back in the Congo, but was doing a degree in psychology. And well, actually, the story I was going to tell, I'll say in a moment, but one of my first encounters with Michel was in the School of Modern Greek when we were both learning Greek, and we were in the same class, and we were walking down the street after class, and I told him, I said, he asked me what I was going to study, and I said, I'm going to study theology. And he said, theology? He said, what's that? I said, tried to explain. He was like, you could study God? Yeah. He was so baffled by how that could be, right? But I think that's a very good example of what we're talking about as far as these different kinds of approaches. I mean, he comes from Africa, and this kind of approach of kind of a much more like pre-rational approach to the world.
Yeah, definitely. There's
you could study God? He was just like, he thought that was so funny. we try. But the story that I was going to share was oh, right. Yes. It was how he met his wife, his now wife. They've been married for 7 years now, and they've got 4 kids, and they live in outside of Thessaloniki. But he was on the bus, on the public bus, and he saw a girl, and he went up and said, he thought in his mind, he said, oh, that's a pretty girl. I want to talk to her. And so he goes up in this crowded bus, and mind you, Greece is a relatively homogenous society, and on one level, at least in the modern context. And so, he's an African guy going up to a Greek girl. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So he goes up to her, and he just starts talking to her. And if you know Michel, he's got a very kind of infectious personality. I mean, he's just he's a very positive, optimistic guy. And so he's just, you can imagine he's just, talking it up with this girl. And then at the end of the conversation, he has to get off, and he says, all right, I'm going to give you my number. He doesn't even ask her for her number. He says, I'm going to give you my number, and if I don't hear from you within 2 weeks, I'll know that you're not interested. And and so I remember sitting with him in the student cafeteria while it was during those 2 weeks. And hold on one second. Somebody's coming. Let me just pause this. Let me see who this is. Hold on one sec.
Oh, you're back?
We're back. Sorry. Got interrupted there. But anyway, so Michel's on the bus, right? Mm-hmm. So he's telling me all of this at the student cafeteria. And here I am, an Orthodox guy from America, grew up in the house of converts, where it's like, dating, you got to be very prudent in the way that you approach the opposite, sex, and you want to make sure that you're, doing it in a very godly and holy way and everything. And here I'm listening to this guy from Africa who's also Orthodox, and he's just telling me that he just randomly walks up to this girl and asks, gives her his number, and sweet talks her, and it's just like, what is going on here, right? And there's and then just waits to hear from her. Well, turns out she calls him back, and they end up dating. And turns out, she comes from a very faithful family. She's got, I think, 7 siblings. A couple of them are monastics. And her grandfather is a monk on Mount Athos. After I think her grandmother passed away, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the exact details, but very, very faithful. But again, it wasn't based on him knowing anything about her. It was just like he saw this girl, he goes up and he talks to her. So simple, so just kind of and it's just I had nothing to say. I was just in my mind, I'm thinking this is so wrong. Like, you shouldn't have just gone, like, that's not how you're going to get your future wife, but it was, it was. And they're happily married, and, they've got a beautiful, beautiful family, and, doing great. And so it's, that kind of simplicity is a beautiful thing.
I think in the West, people overthink things quite a bit.
No question.
And sometimes you just need to go and say hello.
Yeah.
Maybe they're your future spouse.
Yeah. And just kind of, being, living from the heart. I mean, I think that's what really struck me about my time in Greece in general was, it has its problems like anywhere, but just witnessing people living from the heart. By and large, I mean, I think they're much more heart-centered.
Yeah, and you were in a good area, Thessaloniki.
Yeah,
I remember the first time I visited. We went to this monastery in Veria, and the first thing, the nuns from Cyprus, they were from where we were, and the first thing one of the nuns started saying to us is that they're very. The people here are a little different. They're closer to Mount Athos, so it's a sort of they're closer to the church, but they're also more like what you said, from the heart.
Yeah.
So it's a good area.
Yeah. It made a very strong impression, and even just like Saint Porphyrios' comments about, like, he didn't have a ticket, he didn't know how he was going to get there.
Well, I mean, he was a child.
Yeah, he was a child, but it almost reminds me of the myrrh-bearing women, when they go to anoint Jesus's body.
Yeah.
They don't know how they're going to roll away the stone. It's like they're already halfway there, and then the thought occurs to them, wait, how are we going to roll away the stone?
That kind of mentality, like I saw it a lot as a kid. I remember the older women of Ayanapa. I remember I look back on them, and I think of the Mirofores. I think of these we've talked about it before, like this old school piety that kind of there's a simplicity, and they would talk about how every year they would, if there was a year when there was a drought, they would go to they would do a paraklesis and procession for rain to Prophet Elijah. And people would always go with their umbrellas before they, it's a drought.
Sure, that's
they
funny.
went with their umbrellas. They were like, good rain. And it's true, actually. I was reading something the other day where so Marathovonos, my father's village, is dedicated to Prophetis Elias, Prophet Elijah.
Yeah.
So, and it's true. One year, that's exactly what happened. They had a drought. They went, and it downpoured.
It's amazing.
So there's a reason why people were, besides the fact that they were just very simple, because they didn't have the access to, they didn't have access to higher education. Although, and in my dad's village, actually, a lot of people were educated. But in general, it was kind of like cause and effect. Okay, we did the procession. It rained. Okay, next time, umbrellas. We did it. It worked. Excellent.
Well, and there's a lack of because of the guilelessness of just that kind of like cause and effect. There's also it to an extent it eliminates the factor of ego that we're so plagued with oftentimes. I mean, I think when if I were to do that, I mean, I would automatically just go down this rabbit hole of like, oh, well, I guess I'm some sort of holy person or something like that. But that would just never like enter into their mind. You know what I mean? Like that idea. It's just such a foreign.
They would say, well, we asked Prophet Elijah, and he did it.
Yeah, that's simple as that. The whole idea of like, so, but and this is the tension that we live in. I think this is the dynamic of living in a modern world with its complexities, with its benefits and with its drawbacks, but also being recipients of a pre-modern faith.
Well, and I think that it has a lot to do with the precepts of what modern and the modern world is built on, right? The
Right.
Enlightenment,
Sure.
rational thinking,
Sure.
uh, and even in the United States, I mean, the founders, majority of them were deists. I know
Right.
that's a big, for some people there, especially evangelicals, but it's
Oh yeah.
just true
It is true.
that
Yep.
they were deists,
Absolutely.
and they lived in a Christian culture, so they didn't throw that out,
Right.
but they also didn't promote it. So
Right.
what we're seeing now is kind of like what we're beginning to see now is the legacy of they never set a Christian foundation for the United States or in any of these countries,
Sure.
and so therefore it is slowly, if not quickly, moving further and further away from that. So we're kind of breathing in the air. It's in the air. We
Yeah.
kind of escape it.
No, you can't escape it. You can't escape
No.
it.
No.
It is, but the simplicity, I mean, I think one thing that Saint Porphyrios does help with, in my mind, is the way, like, even for a complex modern person, he does, like, there's a connecting point between his simplicity and his pastoral advice, in the sense of, like, and we can get into this maybe in a later episode, of like his easy path, the quote unquote easy path, the way that he provides for, like, this kind of, like, what he calls, like, the bloodless path towards Christ, of turning towards Christ in a simple way, with love, turning towards the light, opening our arms towards Christ like a little child. I mean, these kinds of things that he talks about, at least for me, have been very significant ways of, at least momentarily, turning myself towards Christ in a very kind of simple way.
But I think it is simple though. I mean, okay, to become a desert ascetic, maybe not as simple. To become a theologian, not as simple. But to look into yourself,
Mm-hmm.
look at what's wrong with it, admit that,
Mm-hmm.
and turn to God
Right.
in confession and in the sacraments. I mean,
Sure.
it's not that complicated. I mean, you just kind of have to accept certain things about yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe more complex for one person and easier for another. But
Yeah. No, it is. It's inherently simple.
Right. It's inherently simple.
It's inherently simple, and he kind of reveals that for us, you could say,
Right.
And gives us an opportunity to kind of turn back to that.
Right.
That simplicity, for sure. Yeah.
And it's something I've mentioned him many times, but Metropolitan Athanasius of Limassol.
Yes, absolutely.
I love listening to his radio show, and I heard the same thing the other day. Somebody he's like, it's all very simple. It's easy. just do the thing and but all jokes aside, he's completely right. Inherently, it is very basic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just working on yourself, but working on yourself not in like a secular self-help, whatever,
right.
But rather you kind of giving up. I feel like all day long, all I do is strain. I strain.
Right.
I'm straining all day long to I don't know, all the things.
To try to do what we're supposed to do.
And what you need to really do is just throw up your hands and say, "Forgive me. I am broken. I need you."
Sure.
Said not very eloquently, but
sure.
But sort of surrender yourself.
Sure.
Surrender yourself. Don't put more burdens on yourself than you need, because I think we all struggle from that.
Yes.
We all expect more from ourselves.
Yes. Amen.
And I think that Father Porphyrios he cuts through that.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
He cuts through that. For him, it was effortless. He just effortlessly spoke. I mean, listen to the first sentence of that book.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not a man who's just telling you
Mm-hmm.
the truth?
Right.
But in a such a pure and childlike. That was another thing people describe him as being kind of childlike.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. But I think I guess the main thing I kind of, and I've been really learning this kind of, that this whole thing is not, it's not that complicated. We shouldn't put more and more burdens on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we can't achieve something, but in and of itself, that is an achievement.
Yeah.
To recognize that you cannot achieve it and ask for God's help in continuing on. And I think that's where we're all getting caught up in the modern way of looking at things.
Right.
We don't understand that part of the spiritual struggle is actually just not giving up, but kind of giving up.
Yeah.
Giving up, but not throwing it on the ground, but handing it over to God. Right?
Yep.
So
resting in God.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's so fundamental, and it's something I personally have been kind of realizing. And as I've entered the 30s, and life has become a bit more serious, more responsibilities.
Right.
But I guess we should probably end.
We this is the episode that never ends. We're just going to keep talking and no, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's it's I mean, the thing that the way that I approach Saint Porphyrios in many respects is, rather than trying to quote unquote apply things from his life or teachings to my life, I kind of, in reading him, allow myself to kind of get like infected by his spirit, and I think that's what has proven, at least as I see it, to be the most kind of authentic and effective way of taking what he has, is just like, man, like this is, just kind of like enjoying and soaking in the, the kind of beauty of that approach, and allowing it to just kind of melt away all the other stuff. And if
anybody hasn't read it, go and read it.
This is really just an extended commercial for
we will I think we should continue it next time.
Sounds great.
Do you want to go into well, we can talk about this after the
we're not going to tell you what we're going to talk about
we're not going to do that
off the air. It's going to be a secret conversation between me and Strati. So, well, good to be back again. And through Saint Porphyrios's intercessions, we hope that this is of some use and benefit to you, our wonderful listeners.
And if not, we had a good conversation.
Exactly, and we hope we were at least somewhat entertaining.
Yes. As long as we were comprehensible at some point.
Yeah, maybe possibly partially at some point. Hopefully. Tentatively. So, all right. Until next time.
Until next time.
All right.